Okay, so in your notebooks, you should have the AIM number written down exactly as it's listed here. Um, is that AIM number right? I'll have to double check that, but regardless, we will make sure it's right. Who were Locke and Hobbes, and what were their important ideas? So that's kind of what we're after today. And the answer, you guys all gave answers to this. Do you think people are naturally good and evil, and why? So, kind of an interesting subject. So, away we go here. All right, so I will give you a second to copy this down, and then we will continue. All right, so I'll give you a second here, and we will discuss. So as you guys finish taking down this slide of notes, John Locke, he's the guy who thinks that human beings are generally good and that they are naturally kind of benevolent creatures. And he thinks that the government gets in the way of that. That government kind of facilitates conflict between peoples, and that without government, people would essentially kind of work together to thrive and succeed naturally. So that his belief was that they are naturally good. Hobbes is a different story. He's kind of the opposite. Hobbes is born in Westport, England, April 5th, 1588. So he believes that human beings are born with certain ideas and certain needs. He's the guy who thinks that everyone is kind of inherently evil, and that government exists to keep people from tearing each other apart. That's his idea. So you can see how this topic kind of relates to the do now when we're asking, do you think people are inherently good, or do you think people are naturally evil? Which of those? So you can see that each of these guys that we're talking about fall on a certain side of that. So basically what Hobbes believes is that if government were removed, people would kind of devolve into this state of what's called the state of nature, which he describes as people going to war with each other for control of resources. So there is limited amounts of resources on Earth, and that if government does not exist, people would basically kill each other for these resources, and it would be all-out war. He called it the war of all against all. So where John Locke believes that if we were to remove government, people would work together to thrive and succeed, Hobbes believes that if we were to remove government, people would devolve into the state of nature, where it would be a war of all against all for control of resources. And that's his belief. So you can see kind of the difference between them. So when we kind of stack these guys up next to each other, Locke is a believer in the goodness of men, generally and inherently. And Hobbes believes that the human condition in its natural state is a much more selfish and devious creature than it would be, with government. So that is kind of the important thing to understand about these two guys. And this will kind of form the basis for how we examine them going forward. Okay, so for today, we went over a couple of highlights about Hobbes and Locke and really kind of how they saw things differently. So what you guys are going to do is under the classwork for AIM 2.4, you have a Google form here, and it's really just 2 thought questions and then an exit slip. Okay, so it's important to note that these are asking you for 3 or more complete sentences for each question. So make sure that you are hitting that mark so you get the proper credit that you get. Don't be afraid to provide some reasoning, some logic behind your answer. These are not, what's your favorite color kinds of questions. These are a little bit, designed to be a little bit more of deeper thinking. So number 1, in your opinion, do you think there are certain rights that all people have regardless of their government? Or do all rights come from the government you live under? And why? So which of those do you think is true and why? Answer in 3 or more complete sentences. This relates to Locke's idea of natural rights, his belief that all people have the right to life, liberty, and property, and that is a right that all people have regardless of their government. And then number 2, in your opinion, which is more important, personal privacy or national security? Why? So we said that the social contract is the idea that citizens will surrender certain rights to privacy in return for the government strengthening national security. So I want to know how you feel about that. Do you think that's a fair trade or not? Which is more important to you, personal privacy or national security? One comes at the expense of the other. So if you have to choose one and be left without the other, which do you think is more important and why? Answer in three or more sentences. And then finally, I know we kind of this is another version of the do now question, but I want to know whose side you're on. Are you a Locke person or are you a Hobbes person? If we removed government, would people work together to succeed? Or would they compete against each other for resources and devolve into that state of nature where it's the war of all against all? So who do you agree with, Hobbes or Locke, and why? And make sure you answer in three or more complete sentences.